Over the past few years, inflation has been crushing the American consumer. And I'm sure you're feeling these effects every single time you go to get groceries, you go to pump your gas, and you go out on the town trying to have a fun night. I know here in my city, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, drinks are getting more expensive. They're starting to mirror the costs that I saw in Chicago, that I saw in Nashville, that I've seen in bigger cities than Pittsburgh. So inflation is no joke. You and I both know this. But today, I want to go through an article on TradingView talking about how inflation is almost down to the Federal Reserve's 2% target and why we should be so happy. We should be so excited that inflation is coming down, that prices are coming down, I guess. With no further ado, let's dive right in. See, this article is titled, "The Fed's Preferred Inflation Gauge is Nearly Back to Target." Because, if you don't know, the Federal Reserve said once inflation was super high, it got up to 9%, according to their data, according to how they measure it, even though if you look at the actual price changes, it was more like 20, 25, 30, upwards of 50, 75%, depending on the items, depending on where you were looking to use your dollars, put them to work. Their goal was to get inflation back down to 2% using their measures, using the CPI. And this article, written on October 31st, says that it's almost there. Let's dive right in. By Matt Grossman, the Federal Reserve's preferred inflation measure fell to 2.1% in September, showing the central bank has wrestled price increases nearly back to target. They have wrestled those price increases. They have really just gotten on top of inflation. They've done just a great job. Prices measured by the Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index, that's a fucking word salad, rose by just under 0.2% between August and September, the latest leg of a significant cooldown in the pace of inflation. During the most dramatic spell of inflation in 2022, prices were climbing by nearly 1% a month by this gauge. Okay, so let's stop here for a second. Prices have come down to 2.1%. That's what the article is saying. Except that that's not really what these numbers mean. Right? The way that they measure inflation is year over year. So that means at this time, year over year, prices have gone up 2.1%. Now, you and I both know through personal experience, through purchasing things with our own money, that this 2.1% number simply isn't real. It's a number that they fabricate using their own algorithms, their own equations. It does showcase, as George Gammon on the Rebel Capitalist show always talks about, the trend, right? Prices are not accelerating as much as they were back in 2022, early 2023. They're not accelerating as quickly because we're moving out of the supply shock. The supply chain is working a little bit better, and we've normalized a little bit more. Keyword little bit, because we still have a long way to go. But prices are not accelerating as much. However, this 2.1% number, assuming that it was the full truth, the objective truth, no strings being pulled, no sugarcoating, no nothing. Assuming that was still the truth, prices are still accelerating, right? Just because this number is falling, just because the index is getting lower, doesn't mean that prices are coming down. That doesn't mean things are getting cheaper. There's a big difference there. This is called disinflation, and if you were to see prices come down, you would see a negative number here. You wouldn't see positive 2.1%. You would see negative 0.2% or negative 0.5%, like we briefly saw in 2009 after the GFC, the Great Financial Crisis. So I want to make that distinction. Prices, even by their gauge, are still going up. They're just going up slower. But let's continue. We've been talking about a soft landing for a very long time, said David Kelly, chief global strategist at JP Morgan Asset Management. Now you can say, okay, the eagle has landed. Ooh, famous last words right there. Now you can say, okay, the eagle has landed. I remember going through transcripts and going through statements from Ben Bernanke in 2006-07 when he said that subprime was contained, whenever he said that the crisis we were seeing brew, get hotter. He said that it was under wraps. We had control of it. Famous last words. Maybe the eagle hasn't landed yet. Maybe he's going to land or she's going to land, but it might be a little rough. Maybe, just maybe. Who knows? The figures didn't show that inflation has been fully tamed. Core prices, which exclude volatile food and energy costs, are still up by 2.7% over the past year. That figure has been roughly flat since May. Prices for services, 3.7% greater than a year ago, have been especially stubborn. The data comes days before a presidential election that has been defined in part by voters' exasperation with price increases over the past few years. Inflation has been declining since mid-2022, but many Americans remain intensely frustrated with sticker shock for big purchases and everyday items. Correct. Because, let's face it, you and I, unless we have some ideological position that we are holding super tight to, something that we are willing to metaphorically die for, it comes down to the economy. That's what they've always said. It has always reigned true. It's the economy, stupid. If the economy is doing well, if money is flowing, if jobs are being created, if wages are going up, if prices are not going up as fast as the wages, there's going to be a psychological shift in the mind of every single person within the economic system saying, wow, times are good. I can go spend. I can go out and drink. I can go take that vacation. I can go spend money on that new car. Yeah, I don't have all the money, but I can make it because my wages are going up, or there's more opportunities, or maybe I can start a side business. Anticipation of the future is high. Hopes are high. Economics comes down to psychology. The money supply, the way that things get spent, the way people act, it all comes down to psychology. It has nothing to do with, oh, they're peeling back the money supply, or, oh, the businesses are shutting down. No, these are all actions based on the psychology of the actors within the economy. So you can see that this election, especially if you look at the advertising, I know the advertising I've been getting has all been about the economy. Both sides are trying to tell you that the other side will ruin the economy. I don't know who's right. I don't know who's wrong, but they're both trying to play on the economic fears, because if they can get you to believe that they're going to make the economy better, you're probably going to vote for them because you just want to live a good life, right? You just want to make money. You just want to support your family. You just want to be comfortable. It's not necessarily about, oh, he stands for this or she stands for this. It's about the economy. Still, prices haven't broadly dampened their appetite to shop. Inflation-adjusted U.S. economic output grew at an annualized rate of 2.8% in the third quarter of the year, the Commerce Department said Wednesday, with consumer spending driving much of the expansion's continued strength. The inflation data likely kept the Fed on track to cut interest rates by a quarter percentage point when the central bank's next policy meeting wraps up next Thursday. That would be in November, this month. In mid-September, the central bank opted for an aggressive half-point rate cut, but resilience in the labor market and the broader economy has led several Fed officials to call for a more gradual pace of rate reductions going forward. Friday morning's data on the labor market in October is the last remaining economic report before next week's election and Fed meeting. Economists surveyed by the Wall Street Journal are expecting to see that unemployment held steady at 4.1%. Now, I can tell you, I'm reading this article after the labor market data has come out, which I'm about to film a video on right after this one. I can tell you, spoiler alert, if you've lasted this long, that it wasn't pretty. The labor market data wasn't good, though unemployment did hold steady at 4.1%, but the labor market data was not good. And really what this is leading us to conclude, at least likely, because as George Gammon says, and as I fully agree, it's all about probabilities. Nothing is set in stone. Nothing is certain. Things can change very quickly. It's a dynamic world, and you don't want to get pigeonholed into one dogmatic belief system about where the stock market's going to go, where the economy is going to go, what the world is going to look like, what's going to happen geopolitically. That will blind you to the full realm of possibilities that are out there. But what this article shows and what the labor market data shows, which I'm about to make a video on, is that there's a reason why inflation is cooling. There is a reason why the CPI and the index is falling. And it's not because the Fed is doing anything. It's not because the Federal Reserve are headed by a bunch of magicians and wizards. No, it's because demand is drying up. Inflation, by and large, is caused by consumer demand. How much do people want to spend? How excited are they about the future? Do they see opportunities ahead? Do they feel optimistic about what is coming around the corner? If they do, they're probably going to spend more. They're going to go out. They're going to drink. They're going to buy clothes. They're going to buy cars. They're going to buy watches and chains, whatever they want. They're going to buy it because they feel good about the future. They want to live now because they feel like, well, I'll be able to make the money back. So inflation is largely cooling because people aren't spending as much. Yes, people are still spending. Retail spending hasn't fallen off of a cliff in the sense that nobody's out doing things. I see it. I drive around Pittsburgh. I see it. People are still spending money, but there's a difference between how they were in 2021, 2022, and how they are today, late 2024, going into 2025. There's a big difference. And what we're seeing across the world as well is that prices are also getting closer and closer to that deflationary territory where they're actually starting to decline. In some areas, they are. In other areas, they're getting very, very close. And so this is leading me to believe, it's leading a lot of people to believe that sooner or later, we're going to see a contraction because inevitably the credit cards will get tapped. Inevitably, the money will run dry. Inevitably, the stock market won't get bid up anymore. And inevitably, retail spending will collapse because the demand just isn't there. Why are gas prices coming down? Probably because people can't afford to fill up their cars or they're not driving as much. So all of this to say, especially with this labor market data, that moving into 2025, regardless of what happens on November 5th, you're probably going to see a much different economy. And the trend is in motion. And even if things are to turn around, the lag effect is going to make it so that this inertia is going to push us deeper and deeper into contraction, regardless of what the Fed does, regardless of what money falls from the sky, regardless of if there's a psychological shift. The inertia will keep this train going. The train doesn't stop immediately. It stops after the momentum completely gets killed. So with all that being said, inflation data is cooling, but there may be a sinister reason why. And I want you to keep in mind that, again, there are no such things as certainties. It's all probabilities. But perhaps this is another sign, another piece to the puzzle showing us that the end of 2024 might continue to be slow and into 2025 may slow even more. And we may be looking at a very slow 2025 into 2026 where we could just repeat 2020, 2021 again. But who knows? Because really, at the end of the day, what do I know? With that being said, I appreciate you tuning into this, and subscribe if you want more economic updates, more thoughts and opinions on the way that I'm investing, the way that I'm putting my money to work, what I'm thinking about in the future. Try to keep it real. Try to keep it honest. That's all I can do, right? So, yeah, I'll see you in the next one.